Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. In this video I want to do a sort of preview, how to play, feedback video about the new upcoming board game Avatar Journey of Aang from Bad Crow Games. So the deal with this is that this is kind of like an early sort of like prototype version of the game that I have here. The game will be launching on the crowdfunding platform Gamefound, I believe September 19th. And then I think the plan is that stuff will actually ship out more in the summer next year. So I think July is what they're saying currently or initially. But we'll see what happens when the campaign page actually goes live. So yes, this is a very kind of early kind of a preview of the game. So straight away, what I have here is not the finalized version of the game. This is not just like a retail copy of the game that I happen to have like so many months earlier. They told me ahead of time, and just to a certain degree you can see it in some of the kind of components of the game, that yes, it is going to improve before the final product, but it mostly I think represents a really good sense for what the game is going to be in its final version here. I will say that how this video came about is that Bad Crow Games got in touch with me and basically asked me, hey, will you make a video on this if we send you a kind of early review copy of the game? And I said yes, because of course I have covered this game before. From the earlier days of when they first started talking about it, back in like 2022 I think, and we've heard little bits and pieces about it, and I did a video like when their Gamefound page went up initially, and stuff like this. So it is a game I have been following, and so of course I was going to jump at the opportunity to get a full-on look at the game quite a bit ahead of time. So just be clear, I was not paid to do this video. Purposefully, part of the aim of this video is for me to give feedback on the game, and that needs to be honest for the game to be better in the final product, which is kind of what I am going to be doing here, of course. So those notes out of the way. The way this video is going to work is I'm going to cut to a rather large section of the video going over how to set up the game, how to play it. I'm only going to play a few turns here. I'm not going to play a full game, but just enough to where you get, I think, an in-depth look at how the game kind of functions, what the mechanics are. You get a sense for how complicated or not complicated it is. And then I will end with a sort of opinion feedback section at the end of the video. And that's the section where I will more be giving sort of my thoughts on where each of like the components are at this stage of the process, and maybe final stages of improvement, as well as just my overall thoughts on the game at the end here. So yeah, enjoy the how to play section. There'll be timestamps if you want to jump ahead to specific sections, but next up is the how to play section. Okay, so let's do setup for the game. So straight away, of course, you have your board, which is the map of the Avatar world. It also has marked on it, of course, the Journey of Aang, which, as we know, is basically a Southern Water tribe trying to get across to the Fire Nation so that you can face Fire Lord Ozai. But if you run out of time, you end up having to face Phoenix King Ozai if you spend too long and the Southern's Comet track gets onto his card. You have to face the more powerful version of Ozai. And the idea is that along the way, you are traveling through the kind of path of the series. So Southern Water Tribe to Northern Water Tribe to Ba Sing Se, and then eventually to the Fire Nation, of course. So it's a pretty accurate. I really like the map. But the first thing you do in terms of setup is you have to put these elemental tokens on each of the locations where there is a marker for it. So beside it there's a circle empty spot, and one of the 4 types of elemental tokens has to go there. The idea is that you get all of these, you shuffle them up, and you randomly distribute them throughout the board, and you get a random assortment of locations and what elements are at each of these locations. This is how a lot of the variety in terms of what numbers you need to meet to complete challenges happens, because sometimes you will get a run of the same element all in a row and it makes it quite challenging. Other times it will be very random, and that's part of, you know, what this game I think has going for it, is that there is quite a bit of, every time you play there'll be different challenges, there'll be different element stuff laid out, you'll be playing as different characters and stuff like that. So once you have those distributed, the next thing you do is you lay out the challenge cards. So challenge cards effectively are like what you have here. Like, these effectively are challenge cards, they just are slightly different because they're more story based. So Ozai is your kind of final challenge. Guru Patik is always placed over here at the Eastern Air Temple. So they're kind of set in stone. There's no randomness with those two. Same goes for the Phoenix King. He always goes on the Sozan's Comet track. But the other ones are completely random. So they are separated into level 1, 2, and 3. And so you have a deck of cards where, you know, you have level 1 challenges, 2 challenges, and level 3s. So you separate them all out, you shuffle each of those levels of cards, and you put 3 level 1 challenges in slots A, B, and C down here. You put 3 level 2 challenges over here for D, E, and F, and then you put 2 over here for H and I, and those ones are level 3s. With G, the missing letter, being what Guru Patik is, because he's like 3/4 of the way through the journey. He's over here as a kind of set challenge. So they're meant to be placed face down. On your first playthrough of the game, it says to play with them face up, so you have a little bit more of a sense of what you're doing. And I think it's mainly to get a sense for the numbers and, like, okay, if I move this far, what sort of numbers are we talking about at this point in the game? You know, what are the big numbers I need to get to be the challenge? That sort of idea. When you've played a little bit more, you can sort of see why they are placed face down. So you have to take a little bit more of a risk with doing each of the challenges. So once they're in place, then you pretty much get to dealing with, okay, players. How many players are you playing with? It's 1 to 4 players, so you can play solo, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to play solo, and I'm going to be playing as Iroh. But the way that this works is effectively each player plays as a trainer card, which are these cards here. They're double-sided, with one side being more powerful than the other. And you have characters like Bumi, Gyatso, Katara, Toph, Kyoshi, Zhang, and the dragons Ran and Shaw. I was only given 8 of these, but I think in the final version of the game, there is going to be like 16 of these. So what happens is each player is drawn 3 randomly, and then they get to choose from among those 3 which character they want to be their kind of trainer for the game. The main thing that is different between them is, of course, each of them has their own effect, sometimes 2 effects. Each of them will flip to the better side at a different point in the game, and depending on what element the card is, it will basically determine what your trainer dice is, and then on flip, what the upgrade dice is going to be as well. So, Iroh gives me 2 fire dice, and the idea is, when you start the game, there are these 6 starter dice. They're the black dice here, they're very basic. Every player will roll those 6 dice, but each player will then roll the 2 dice associated with their trainer. So Iroh gives me 2 fire dice, but Bumi would give you 2 earth dice instead. And that's the basic idea. So that's one of the key differences, is that you'll have these 2 extra dice that you'll roll depending on what player it is. So that's the main thing to talk about with that. When it comes to the flip points, they're again points on the map. So Iroh will flip at chapter marker 2, with the idea being that chapter marker 1 happens here at Makapu. Chapter marker 2 is at the Misty Palms Oasis at this point on the map. Chapter marker 3 is the Guru Patik G challenge over here. And then the final chapter marker is the second to last point on the map, and it is the Fire Nation, just before the Fire Lord Ozai battle. So some flip earlier, some will flip later on, but that's basically the idea there. Each player has a different trainer character. Then we get to, I'll quickly explain these actually first. The other way you can get dice in addition to flipping your character over is these technique cards. So these are just, you shuffle the amount that you have and you place 8 of them into effectively a bit of a marketplace to a certain degree on the side of the board. I was again only given 8, but I think there's going to be 20 of these. And these are cool. They're like the waterbending scroll style things. Air funnel, thick mud. There's 2 for each element is what I have here. And they cost different amounts of completed harmony cards. So when you complete these, spin them all the way around, you store these, and then you can use these later on to purchase these cards, which is another way to upgrade your dice into the more advanced elemental dice later on in the game. So early on, you're not going to see too much of that, but later on, that will become quite strategic based on what element dice you feel that you need in your dice pool. Then we probably need to bring these cards into play here. So how you set up this deck straight away, there are 2 sort of separate kind of colored piles of these cards. The top of the deck is going to be made up of all the silver cards. And again, these are earth, earth, water, fire, air cards. They're all basically the same. You shuffle them, that's the top of your deck. The bottom of the deck is made up of gold and also some red cards, with again these always being earth, fire, water and air. The only difference is that the fire more advanced cards are the red cards, and these are the Sozin's Comet cards, and these are what move the marker along. Every time one of those red cards comes out of the deck, whether you draw it or whatever way, each red card moves this comet timer along. There's 7 of them, so by the time the 7th one comes out, it goes from the final marker onto the card, and you have to face Phoenix King Ozai instead of the Fire Lord. So that's what you do. You shuffle up both halves of the deck, and then you put the silver cards on top of the gold and red cards, and that's your deck. With the idea being that, of course, early on, you don't have to worry too much, because it's going to be quite a while before you see a red card, but later on in the game, the distribution of those red cards is going to really put you on a bit of a countdown timer. So that's what you do with these. Then, each player gets 2 cards as their starting hand. So that's what you do. Each player gets 2. So in this case, a solo game, I get 2. 2 cards are put from the top of the deck into what's called the environment. And I'm just going to put them up here to just be clearly there on the board, but slightly out of the way. I'm a little cramped for space in terms of filming, but the idea is that you would just have these sort of slightly off to the side. This is a public kind of spot on the board. Everyone is meant to have access to these. The environment is effectively just a place for cards to go out of the deck that isn't straight into someone's hands. When you draw cards, you can choose to take them from the deck or from the environment. The key thing is that the reason that this is a countdown timer is that, of course, you can draw cards on your turn if you want, but if you don't draw cards, either way, every turn, 2 cards come out of the deck and go into the environment. Then that happens every single turn. That's the countdown timer. The environment can hold 2 of each element, and the second a third comes in, they kind of cascade away. So if 3 waters went in there, suddenly it would go down to 0. So you have to just be aware of that. It doesn't just permanently stack up and give you perfect selection. You got to be quick in terms of deciding when you take stuff from the environment. So that explains that. And then finally, 2 cards will also go into the kind of trainer board or the practice board. So I'll just put the deck here, and I'll bring this kind of the final kind of pieces of the puzzle into play here, which are these 2 items here. The trainer board and the elemental mastery dials. So as you can see here, we've got space for each of the cards of the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, air. And then you've also got tracks. You've got 2 water tracks, 2 earth, 2 fire, and 2 air tracks, with the idea being that, as you can sort of see here, one of these tokens is the element symbol, and the other one is this sword symbol. And the idea is the element symbol is your power, and the sword is sort of quote-unquote enemy power, or just the level of the challenge you have to face. So this is what we're doing here with these two tracks. It's you keep track of your own power, you keep track of the challenge, and you're trying to keep it so that when you do a challenge, your own power is ahead or at the same point as the challenges. And we'll get to that when we show an example of it. So yeah, 2 cards are going straight onto the board. So this is where you play your cards. From your hand, they go here, but as part of the start of the game, as part of the setup, in the same way that 2 cards go into the environment, 2 cards go into the board. So the first card comes into play as normal, but then it rotates once. The second card goes into play normally, and it's just left like that. To briefly explain card orientation, let's go with this. This is me showing you the card in its standard position. When you first play a card from your hand, it goes in like this. You can see the symbol in the middle of the card is facing the right way up. You'll note that the top left corner, so here, this is the active number. As it is in play, it is giving me 1 earth elemental power. That's what we're talking about here. So the correct orientation when it comes in first is symbol right way up, but also the symbol in the corner is on the top right, with the idea being that when we rotate it, it goes here. The 3 is now the active number. Second rotation, 1 is now the active number, but it is the 3rd position. And then when it rotates again, Earth is now mastered. The card goes off the board because you can see the Earth symbol has now rotated all the way around to being the active symbol, so it's mastered. We complete this card, we hold on to it. This will be what helps us to pay for these techniques later on. That's why we have to hold on to them. And then also, our elemental mastery tracker goes up by 1. So in this case, the Earth one would go from 0 to 1, and that is a bonus. That's a really big bonus, because this thing, what that does is it gives us +1 permanent power. So in addition to what we roll on our dice and what's on the cards, you also add the power from your elemental mastery onto your score. So elemental mastery is permanent number power added to your score. Remember that. And then the other thing with this is that this is also, elemental mastery is how you get the fancy pink avatar dice. With the idea being, you get 1 every time you hit 8 elemental mastery of each individual element. So 1 for water, 1 for earth, 1 for fire, and 1 for air at 8 each. But then you also get I suppose the 5th one when everyone hits 4. So when you get 4 score in every one of the elements, that's another dice. And then the final one, as you would probably guess, is when you get to 8 in every single element. That is the way where you get all of the elemental dice. Because again, the whole idea is that it's about upgrading your standard pool of 6 dice. So how do you turn all of them into 6 of these? Well, you have to get to 8 in every single element. That's how you do it. So that explains, I think, most of what we're talking about here. But again, this comes in and it's already rotated once. That's the setup at the start of the game. Now, how you keep track of things is that straight away, like I said, the score in the top left corner is what's active. So 2 water, so it's our score we're talking about here. So the top track in water goes to 2, and then it's 3 earth. So the top track of earth goes to 3. So that's our current kind of elemental power score, given that again we start the game with 0 elemental mastery, and then when we do challenges we will also roll the 6 starter die and our trainer die to add to that score. But I will get to that when we talk about how we actually do the challenges. But that is the actual beginning of the game. That's the setup overall. So now let's get to actually playing the game and showing you what actions you can take on your turn, as well as how it kind of works in practice. So we're playing a solo game. We've already done all the setup, of course. We of course start off with our 2 cards in hand, which happen to be 2 earth cards. So not too much variety, especially given that we already have a water and an earth card in play, but we don't have any of the other elements. So, what we do on our turn is we have the option straight away to do one of three actions. The first phase is called the action phase. We can choose to either draw 3 cards into our hand from either the deck or the environment in any order. And that would be our entire turn, basically. The second thing we could do is we can play 2 cards from our hand onto our training board. So, you know, note the difference there. Draw 3, play 2. And then the third thing that you can do is you can choose to adventure, which is basically attempt to move forward along the adventure path, the journey of Aang. And that's where we would initiate a challenge at the end of that. We would roll our dice and see if we are successful and get rewards overall. So 2 of the things you can do are more setup, drawing or playing cards, and then the final thing is kind of making use of that. There is a second phase to your turn, but we'll get to that in just a second. So for the sake of explanation, I'm going to actually just do those things, the different actions on your turn, in order. So for our first turn, let's just draw 3 cards. And I'm going to take 2 cards from the environment here, because straight away you can see that the 2 cards in the environment are water and air, and I only have earth in play. You'll note that there's no fire anywhere, but hopefully the third card, which we have to now draw from the deck, it's not a fire, but it's a third earth. So now you can see we have 5 cards in hand, 3 earth, 1 water, and 1 air, and that is what we've done on our turn now. So it's just a setup turn completely. But there is a second phase to your turn. This is called the training phase. And this is where you can basically... It's mostly a phase about adjusting your dice pool if you can. This is the phase in your turn where if it's possible for you to flip your character over and adjust your dice based on what the character has, you do it here. It's also, this is the point at which if you have achieved the right number on the elemental mastery dials, this is where you add your avatar dice. It's also the point at which if you have enough, you buy a technique from the kind of marketplace of techniques, basically. But obviously at this early point in the game, we don't have any completed cards, we have no elemental mastery, and we haven't progressed along the track at all. So for the first couple of turns, you're probably not really doing anything in the training phase, except perhaps the very last thing you can do, which is you can discard 2 cards from your hand to rotate all of your cards, to try and get them towards practice. That's to a certain degree what's called the training phase. And I believe you can do that as many times as you want. That specific action. So if you have like 6 cards in hand, you could rotate your cards that many times as well. So that's something you can do if you just want to make progress in that way. Just remember that that is something you can do. Discard 2 cards to rotate every card on the board. But for this turn, I'm not going to do anything during my training phase. Which brings us into the last phase of the turn, which is called the comet phase. Now, as that would expect, this is probably where this comes into play, because this is literally the comet track. As I showed you, the comet cards are at the bottom of the deck. They're in the second half. So in the early turns, you're not going to draw a red card randomly and progress the comet track that much. You still do stuff early on in the comet phase because effectively what it is, it's just 2 cards from the top of the deck go into the environment. So this is why there's always a countdown timer on. So 2 air cards go into the environment up here. And that's why you have to keep a track of things. Because if you spend too much time drawing cards and playing cards, all of a sudden the deck's just going to be gone. By the time you actually start making progress, you're going to be really far behind. So that's that. And with the comet phase done, if you were playing a multiplayer game, this is where the second player would take their turn. They would get to take one of their actions using their cards in their hand. If they adventured, they would use their trainer dice. But because we're playing solo, we just get the second turn. So this time I'm going to play cards on this turn. So let's bring the board into play and show you what happens when you actually play cards and stuff like that. So, we have to play cards from our hand, of course. And you'll note what we have in hand here is 3 earth, one water and one air. On the board already we have water and an earth. So fire is going to be our empty one a little bit here. So straight away one of the cards I'm going to play is going to be air. So I'm going to play that in normal. And again, keep in mind, I play it normally. So the symbol is going to be in the top right corner. 3 is going to be the first number in play. So I play air, and straight away my air number will go up by 3 because that's the active number. The second card I'm going to play is going to be, I'm going to play the water card. Now you'll note here, we already have a water card in play, so what happens when I place it on top of it? The idea is you decide I'm going to place a water one down. You rotate the cards below what you're going to play once, so one rotation, and then your new card goes down. Keeping in mind that you need to showcase what's in the top left corner. So now the water score is 1 plus 2. You add up everything stacked together. So now it's at 3. And that's what happens. The same would happen if we played theoretically a third water. We'd put that on top and both cards underneath would rotate until eventually we would complete one of the cards, probably the one on the bottom of the stack. That would go away as mastery. We'd get elemental mastery and so on. So that's our current situation here. As you can see, we're at 3 water, 3 earth, and 3 air power, but 0 fire so far. But that's not too bad because keep in mind our trainer dice are fire dice, so it's not too bad that that's the element that we're missing. But that is our turn for now. I'll also just quickly note as this kind of strategy element here, Iroh's ability, if I was able to play a fire card from my hand, would have let me play even more cards onto the board. His ability is that if any fire card enters practice training, you can take 2 cards from the deck and put them into practice as well. So that's a very strong ability that Iroh has to just accelerate your placing cards effectively. The only thing I'll mention in addition to that during the kind of playing card part of your turn, if you choose to do this, is you can play 2 cards, obviously in any combination, 2 of the same element, 2 of different elements, one of 2 different elements. You can, under certain conditions, play 3 cards in a turn, but it completely depends on what location that you're at. So for instance, if we were at the library here, which is, in this case, it is an air location. If we had 3 air cards in hand, we could spend our playing card part of our turn and play all 3 of those air cards. It doesn't allow us to play 3 of any card, but specifically for that element, we can play a third one if we want to. So that's just an interesting thing, and that changes depending on what location. If it's fire, you can play 3 fire. Interestingly, the Guru Patik location allows you to basically have that active for all elements. So it is considered a fire, water, earth, and air kind of location. So you can do that with any combination of 3 cards. So that's kind of interesting for the Guru Patik spot. But that is it for our second turn effectively, because we go into the training phase and we still haven't mastered anything. We still can't upgrade our dice. We've not made any progress. So all that basically happens is the comet phase happens again. 2 cards go from the top of the deck into the environment. So the environment now has 2 air, 1 earth, and 1 fire. So no cascading happens. And then that brings us into the next turn, basically. Okay, so for this third turn, I'm actually going to do an adventure. So I'm going to do the third action that you can actually do. So we're not really going to be doing much with the cards for now. We just have to make a decision on how far we actually want to progress. So basically what we do here is you separate Appa. So you separate him from his cloud. The cloud is the position that you're at. So in this case, at the start of the game, we're at the Southern Water Tribe. And then Appa is going to determine basically what point we want to try to get to. Now, very simply, we could go to the second spot on the map, to the Southern Air Temple. The problem with that is that it's way too easy. Effectively, that just adds 1 water to our challenge score. Like literally to complete that journey, we just have to have 1 water power anywhere on the board, keeping in mind that we're also going to roll these 8 dice. And our expectation is to literally, from everything, just get 1 water. So the idea is that you can actually choose to move effectively as far as you want. If we go 2, now all of a sudden it's, okay, we're going through here, so it's 1 water plus 1 earth. If we were to go here, it's 1 water plus 1 earth plus another earth. So 2 earth, 1 water. If we move here, it adds another water on, so it's 2 water, 2 earth. If we move here, you know, it adds another earth on. Here it adds an air on. Here we're suddenly getting into the ones where it costs 2 now. So now it's 2 air plus 1 air plus all the other ones, and it really starts to add up as you go forward. And that's not to mention the spots, of course, that have A, B, C, D, and so on. They are the challenges. If we choose to stop at one of the challenges, what we do is we disregard the kind of the score and the element and just focus on what the card at A says. So if we were to do the Kyoshi Island challenge, the idea is we flip over the card. The card happens to be Kyoshi Island. So the challenge adds 3 earth and 3 air in addition to everything before Kyoshi Island. So it would be 1 water plus 3 earth and 3 air. So that's what we're going to do. That's the move that I'm going to make. I'm going to try and do the first challenge on the board. So this is where, again, we'll bring the board back into play, and we can show you how this specifically works. So remember where we're at. Currently, with the cards in the board, we have 3 water, 3 earth, and 3 air. And the idea here is that the challenge is 1 water, 3 air, and 3 earth. So technically, we've actually already completed this challenge. We actually don't, in this case, need to roll the dice because we actually are set up already for it. But if we were behind, we would roll the dice and that would add to our score. So like, for example, if the challenge was actually, say, like 6 and 6, now suddenly we're way behind. And we would need to roll our dice to make up for the fact that, okay, we're good on fire, we're good on water, but we need to get 3 more earth power and 3 more air power. And the way we get that is by rolling the dice. So just as an example of this, even though this one's already passed, even factoring in that we're doing the challenge plus moving 1 in addition to it, let's roll the dice and see like what we actually get and highlight just, you know, how this specifically works. So there's the dice, that's what we got. So we got 1 blank, so that's nothing super interestingly. The starter dice give us 2 water and 2 air. So you can see that there, 2 air, 2 water. So straight away it's 1 of each, so that's 1, 2, and 1, 2. So that's how that adds on. We got 1 earth, so earth moves on by 1. And then the fire dice. So the first fire dice gave us this symbol. This is the wild card symbol. That means you can choose to have this be 1 of anything. For the sake of this, I'm just going to have that be a fire. So we'll move the fire one ahead by 1. And then the last one is quite interesting. You'll note the split aspect of this. There's a line through the middle. It doesn't mean you get all of these symbols. You get to choose either side of the line, basically. So in this case, do I want 2 earth or do I want 1 water? I'll just go for the max here, so I'll go for 2 earth. And you can see there, we've used all of our dice and we've expanded our power well beyond what we actually needed to. But that was sort of the max potential of what we had for this round. If the challenge was more difficult, we might have needed to do some extra stuff there for this turn, which I should probably explain right now. because there's a sense of pushing your luck, there has to be a sense of like making up for that. So there is a kind of phase just before and just after rolling your dice that you can do. So the phase before rolling your dice is that you have to make a choice about this. Do I want to discard 3 cards from my hand to get a lend of an avatar dice for just this turn? So basically the idea is spend 3, get one of these fancy rare avatar dice, not permanently, but just for this one roll, with the idea being that this is just covered in a lot more symbols, including the all 4 elements kind of roll, which is very cool. And the idea is that this is an extra dice. We'd roll our 6 standard dice, our 2 trainer dice, plus a 9th dice as an extra one. So you have to make that decision before you make your roll. So then if you say you did that, you would roll, but then afterwards, if it's still not good enough, you do have an option to re-roll. Now, according to the rules, the way that this works is that you have to make a decision immediately about how many dice do you want to re-roll, and that's it. You get the one re-roll for that amount of dice, and you have to pay 1 card for from your hand for every dice that you rolled. So we'll put the avatar dice away. Let's say this is what we rolled. Let's say it wasn't good enough. We could re-roll, for instance, say the blank that we got by discarding 1 card from our hand to re-roll this dice. And let's say we got a water, you know, that sort of idea. That's the re-roll. And you can do that with a number of different dice. And the rules don't specify anything about, say, like you can only re-roll the starter dice. No, as far as I'm aware, you can re-roll elemental dice or avatar dice if you want to. So that's how that kind of part of the game works, is just like keeping track of the numbers here in terms of how this all operates. The other thing to remember as well when keeping track of the score here is also the score on your elemental mastery gets added to your own power. So if you end up with a situation where, like, let's say you have 2 water mastery, your water score is the number on the cards plus the number on the dial. So in this case it's 2 plus 1, so 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then it's plus whatever water you get from the dice. So your score is made up of 3 different things. This, the cards, and the dice. And then the challenge score is made up of the amount of spaces that you've moved added together, plus, if you choose to do a challenge, plus whatever is on the challenges. And keep in mind, you do get to make that choice. You can completely skip over challenge locations if you want and just use them as locations to make it a bit easier for yourself, but you don't. But you miss out on the reward. Basically, is the idea there. So you know, you do have to kind of keep that in mind. Then we're successful. What happens? Straight away, you get the reward on the card. So Kyoshi Island says, draw 1 harmony card and then rotate all cards of the drawn element. Now, as far as I'm aware, that means I get to draw a card from anywhere on the board. So what I'm going to do is, this is an interesting one here because it's a double reward here. It's draw a card and then rotate that element. So for instance, I don't have any fire. There's a fire in the environment. But if I pick the fire, I don't get the rotate. Whereas, you know, if I pick earth or air, I do get the rotate. Or if I drew from the top of the deck and maybe got water, I'd get the double rotate. So what do I actually want to do here? Which do I value more? That's the kind of tricky thing. As part of my kind of planning here, I would probably make a decision to go for the fire card because I have 3 earth cards in hand and I'm on an earth location. So for my next turn, what I would probably do is take advantage of that and play 3 cards on my turn, all earth, get a big jump ahead on earth and kind of go from there as a bit of strategy. But anyway, that's what happens here. So because I chose fire, no cards rotate because I don't have any fire cards in play. But remember, the challenges are extra. There is a reward just in general for completing an adventure, which is what we have done. That is, all your cards rotate. So air rotates, earth rotates, and then both cards rotate. So you just take the pile and just both of them rotate like this. So that's cool. And again, you adjust your numbers accordingly. Now that the challenge is basically over. So the challenges can all go back to 0 because we will adjust them next time we do an adventure. And then we just adjust our scores. So water goes down to 3, earth back down to 1, fire goes back down to 0, and air is down to 1. And that will get adjusted as we kind of go through the rest of our turns as well. So that's our first kind of thing. That's our first success. And from here, of course, we go into the training phase and decide if we want to do anything there. Then the comet phase happens, of course. So 2 cards go into the environment. So there's an earth and a water. So the environment, you can see, is getting quite full. It's 2 air, 2 earth, and a water. So there's not much more left. Meaning I probably should draw a card at some point. But then, you know, that's the timing situation of like, it's getting kind of full. Do I draw next turn, or do I do my big power play here? Or do I try to just adventure again really quickly? And you're kind of trying to plan out, like, do I hit all of the challenges? Which ones do I skip? You know, there's a bit of that going on as well, because you kind of need to do a little bit of preparation before doing probably the challenges, just because the numbers can get kind of high. And there's some real strategy, I think, to overall what you're trying to do here. And so that is basically the game. As you go through, of course, you know, you're adding cards to the board, everything's getting rotated. Like say, one more rotation, and yeah, this water card will be added to our kind of complete pile. That adds a water mastery here, and now all of a sudden, no matter what, the water track's always at least going to be at 1, plus everything that I add in here. And especially once you start mastering multiple cards and these numbers start going up, you can definitely feel like more confident doing some of these challenges as you go forward. So it all kind of works together pretty nicely. But yeah, just some final points, I suppose, here to just address how you actually go about doing the kind of addition of dice to your pool. So again, your trainer dice are separate. You don't mess with them because they're associated with each individual player's characters. But when it comes to actually buying these things, again, you use completed elemental cards to buy techniques. Let's say, for example, we do like rock launch. Let's say we were able to buy rock launch as a technique. It costs 3 completed earth and 1 completed air. But what it does is it allows us to add 2 earth dice to our dice pool. So the idea here is you open the bag of earth dice and we get 1, 2. And the idea is that these will replace starter dice. And I think the way the rules work is that you when you are upgrading, you have to get rid of all the starter dice first, and then you can start getting rid of other dice after that. So just straight away, 2 dice go away. These become the standard pool. And you just kind of hold on to this card to show that, you know, you have rock launch, you completed this overall. So next time you roll, you're rolling those 6 plus these 2. And now all of a sudden you have 4 elemental dice and 4 standard dice. Then say maybe, oh, you're able to flip your character over. Iroh would allow me to add 2 more fire dice to my dice pool. And all of a sudden you can sort of see how the game kind of starts to work here. When your character comes into play, 2 starter dice go away. We add in, let's say, 2 more fire dice. And then you start to get strategic of like, oh, I'm a bit overloaded on the fire side of things. So maybe next time round I add air dice into my dice pool. Overall, like that. But then next time it comes to upgrading, you're kind of like, I really need the water dice, but what do I get rid of? And this is another part of the game, is like keeping track of this stuff. Of like, okay, finally I can add 2 water dice to my dice pool. Obviously, because I have two of these already, the best solution is to get rid of the 2 fire dice and replace them with the 2 water dice, so I'm a bit more balanced. But it kind of feels bad that I had to get rid of 2 special dice. Well, the rules account for that. When you have to discard elemental dice, you get value from it. So 2 discarded fire dice gets me 2 elemental mastery in fire. So that's really cool. Permanent score increase, because again, this is added to your score. So every elemental dice that you discard gets you a number. So again, it's if you discarded air, you'd get air score, and so on. And it's the same with the avatar dice as well. When you add an avatar dice, when you're finally able to add avatar dice to your dice pool, like for getting to, let's say, 8 water, you have to make your choice at this point as well. Of like, ooh, I'm adding a pink dice in, well, which do I get rid of? And it's like, my cards are maybe doing better on earth, so I'll get rid of an earth dice. And again, when you get rid of the earth dice, you get +1 earth elemental mastery. But now you're rolling 1 avatar dice, 5 elemental dice, and your 2 trainer dice. And the idea is that, again, you continuously add the avatar dice kind of into play until eventually, towards the end of the game, you hope to be in a situation where you're rolling like this. But then one important detail to also remember for the end of the game is when you face Firelord Ozai, regardless of if it's Phoenix King or if it's Firelord Ozai, you face the Firelord alone, because in the story, Aang faces Ozai on his own. So the trainer dice are not included. So you don't include them. Your final challenge against either or is your 6 standard dice, combined with your cards still, and combined with your elemental mastery score. But that is what you're doing. You're down 2 dice that you have had for every other roll in the game up to now. But again, this is where you have to remember, by the time you have this, you're at 8 on everything here. So this is the other way to kind of keep track of the maths, is because you have 8 in all these things here, it makes this actually a lot easier, because you're already at 8 everything. It means you only need 2 of each other element from the dice rolls, keeping in mind that you're also getting scores from whatever cards you have in play. So it means that if you face Firelord Ozai fully equipped, you're probably going to complete that. It's a little bit more challenging with Phoenix King, because of course 13 minus 8 is 5, so you still need to get 5 of every element here across your cards and stuff like that. But you know, remember, you have the other options here, like you can discard cards for rerolls and stuff like that, and that's more towards the end of the game what's happening here. I think the game flows pretty nicely in terms of you're constantly doing stuff, you're strategically picking up the right amount of cards of different types, realizing what element you're down on and making account for that. Even I think what cards get drawn into this can be quite challenging here, because say like jet propulsion, it's 2 fire dice, but it costs 4 completed fire, which can be kind of difficult to get to, versus some of the easier ones like say air funnel, where it's just 2 air 1 earth. That's a lot easier to get to, and so certain ones are a little bit more kind of limiting overall in terms of, like, it can be a bit challenging potentially to add fire dice to your dice pool if you, at least in the cards that I have, if I don't start with a fire character. So there's some interesting details like that that are quite strategic. And then multiplayer, also keep in mind, some of the cards do have a thing called a team practice, which just means that, like, basically your allies can make use of cards in your hand if they happen to be down on an element. For instance, you know, Iroh allows you to contribute fire to their practice, and that's kind of interesting as well. So that's the kind of how to play section, and we'll cut over to my opinions, my feedback on the game to wrap up the video. Okay, so now for the feedback section here. So overall, I really like the game. I want to make that kind of really clear. I do think this is a very, very fun game that I actually do enjoy playing. And to me, even in this kind of prototype version, getting towards, I suppose, the end of kind of R&D or whatever, to me, it definitely plays like a fully functional game, and a game that I would be happy to pick up off the shelf if I saw it in a store. I've never played a dice building game before, so this had that kind of unique aspect to it. I think it incorporates kind of Avatar kind of aspect into it quite well, with the 4 different sort of power levels for each of the 4 elements. And I just like a lot of the elements of the game. I think the game board with the map is very nice, with the Appa miniature that you're kind of moving across it. The dice themselves are very, very nice, with all the different colors and the symbols on them. And I do actually especially like the square harmony cards that you rotate. All that stuff kind of feels cool to do as part of the game. Rolling the dice, spinning those cards when you succeed, and there's actually quite a bit of decision making as you go through the game as well. Even though it's fundamentally quite simple what you do in terms of, you know, draw 3 cards, play 2 cards, or progress along the adventure path. The decision of sort of the kind of ratio in which you do those 3 actions makes for very different games, combined with obviously the different challenges, the fact that the element kind of placements changes game to game. And so it's at its core quite simple what you're doing, and there's quite a bit of randomness to it, but it does feel like your decision making is very, very important, because if you spend too long drawing and playing cards, you're not making any progress, and suddenly you don't have any time more towards the end of the game. But if you rush ahead too far without kind of drawing cards, playing cards, you're going to get later on, without having the power level, the numbers to kind of match up the fact that the numbers later on in the game are much higher. And so there is definitely a strategy to it overall, which I do really, really appreciate. So it's definitely kind of high marks from me in terms of, you know, this game, what it is executing on, what it's trying to do. So that's good. If there was any main criticism, I'd say it probably comes down to the rulebook is definitely not in a ideal state. And I understand that straight away, just from the fact that I was not given a sort of physical rulebook. I was just given a PDF of the most recent kind of version of it, but it still was not maybe super ideal. And that clearly is going to be one of the things that probably I think is going to have to change the most from now to the kind of finalized version. I do want to be clear though, it's not that the rulebook is just a disaster. It tells you quite clearly, in my mind, how to set up the game properly, and the core aspects of how you play are mostly got across, I think, pretty well. Minus, I think, one quite significant, like, missed mechanic that feels very, very important for the rulebook to not even mention. It's functional to get a game up and going, but I would say if you have any questions, if you encounter any point of where it's kind of like, wait, can I do this, or do I have to do it like that? It maybe doesn't go as in depth as it maybe needs to explain some of those situations overall. And there are situations where I do think the rulebook should just be a million times clearer about what is actually going on. The biggest spot for that, I would say, and I think this is so important to get right for the final version of the rulebook, is just to, I think, just make it super simple. When you roll the dice, when you do the end of an adventure and you're comparing the numbers, I would almost write it out as almost like a math problem of just very clearly, your elemental score, your power, is the numbers in your training area, the numbers on the cards, plus your elemental mastery level on the wheels, plus what you get from the dice. It's literally those 3 numbers added together is your score, and you are comparing that versus the challenge level of how far you have moved, the number and the element, plus if you are doing a challenge for this adventure added onto that. Like, it should be, I think, super clear on that idea of it's 3 numbers added together versus 2 numbers added together, and that's that. And it, I think, labors the point to present that that's kind of how it works, when it's actually very simple when you really break it down. But the point I was mentioning earlier on is that it's only one of the kind of reminder kind of insert cards that actually has the detail that you add the elemental mastery number onto your score. My first few games before I got clarification from Bad Crow Games about this, I had played without doing that, and I thought the game was incredibly difficult. Like, I was worried I would be doing this video and I would say I never once finished it. But once they clarified that, oh no, wait, that's something we left out of the rulebook, it's our mistake, we need to adjust that. And once I got the clarification on that rule, it was like, oh, okay, that opens the door, that makes the game a whole lot, kind of function in my mind a whole lot better. But, you know, the rulebook definitely needs some adjustments on stuff like that primarily. But I would also say other situations, like, say, maybe other people didn't encounter this problem, but at least to me, in the way I was thinking about it, I thought this was quite odd. On the map, there is the Guru area, where he is a specific card, and he's kind of treated as his own separate card that goes in the Eastern Air Temple spot every single game. And when you get to that location, when you're like 3/4 of the way through the game, it just feels a bit weird that it works differently than any other spot, because it doesn't really feel like the location is actually that special. Because it's Guru Patik, so it's meant to be this training area where, like, Aang unlocks his chakras, it's about mastering the avatar state, going into, like, book 3, that sort of idea. But it's weird because it's effectively just it's a forced stopping point. It's like one of the only forced stopping points on the whole board. It's basically a mini boss, because it's like you have to get 4 of every element. So it's a challenge that you have to do. There is no reward, as far as I'm aware, for defeating or passing the Guru Patik challenge, even though it's the training area. But the way the game explains why it is a training area is because it has that mechanic where it is a location that is basically considered all 4 elements, and you can play 3 instead of 2 of any particular element if you have that many cards in your hand. And that just doesn't seem like a particularly great trade-off, because you have to spend a lot of time on that location to make use of that. So, at least to me, I come out of that kind of feeling a little bit like, this should be almost like a rewarding spot, but it feels like I'm being punished in a way, almost a little bit. It feels like there should be some sort of a relatively unique reward for the Guru Patik spot if they're going to make it into something kind of special. Whereas it just comes across a little bit like, this is kind of random that this isn't just another standard challenge. Because otherwise, like, you have to stop here, you have to do the challenge, you can't just skip it. So it's just a bit of an odd one in my mind, the way it kind of overall works there. So that's that. Getting into some feedback, I suppose, on some of the components of the game. I want to be clear. A lot of the stuff I think is really, really good. Like I'm gonna talk about the map, the board first. I think this is really good, and it feels like it's pretty much where it needs to be, and just needs some final, like, little adjustments. I like the quality of it. I love the art and, like, the new depiction of the kind of world map here. It feels like it's like, in my mind, it feels like if more people see this, they would want this art as like a poster to be their sort of map of the Avatar world. It's that good in my mind. One little issue straight away would be, and I'm sure they probably know this already, but Serpent Pass is spelled incorrectly. They have it P-A-N-T-S, whereas of course it should be P-E-N-T-S. So that's just a typo that should be fixed in the many months before launch. That's fine. Other thing that I would put in the sort of like error category is just UA Bay is listed here. And while technically, yes, this location here is known as UA Bay, In the Aang era, during the events of Avatar The Last Airbender, where this game is set, it is not known as Yue Bay. It gets named Yue Bay post-series at some point in between the gap between Avatar and Korra. We assume in or around the formation of these areas into Republic City, which of course they're not dealing with Korra. They're making that quite clear in some of the comments on their page and stuff like that. It's only ATLA they have the license for. This is a Korra location and probably shouldn't be there if you're trying to be accurate in that way. You should, I suppose, maybe contact Avatar Studios and find out what it used to be called, if it was called anything, or leave it out. So that's just one detail that, just for lore accuracy, should be correct. One thing I'll praise is that they do list up here that this location is the capital of the Northern Water Tribe. It's Agna Kel-A. But interestingly, when you go down to the south of the map, they don't list the capital of the south, Wolf Cove. And it does feel like if you're giving us the capital for the north, the capital for the Earth Kingdom, Ba Sing Se, why don't you give us the capital listed on the map for the Southern Water Tribe? Same sort of for the Fire Nation. They don't really have a marker point for like the actual, they don't name like the capital. They don't mention like Royal Caldera City or you know, Harry Bulkan or anything like that. It's just the Fire Nation, and the other marked locations are just kind of the Fire Islands around that, and not any location actually on the Fire Nation. But in my mind, they are relatively small, you know, adjustments that are needed here to make this basically perfect. And then one thing I just note is just, it's kind of cool. They do name the ocean, so you get the Kaio Ocean, which I think is the first time we are ever hearing that name. So that feels like a new location I've never heard referenced before in Avatar. So high marks for the board, just some little detail stuff that needs adjustment. Basically, completely in the typo slash lore department, effectively. I think the dice overall are really, really good. They are absolutely highlights of the game. I especially love the design on the pink Avatar dice. It just feels very cool when you finally get to use these kind of later on in the game. And it's the same for going from the black starter dice to the elemental dice as well. It feels cool to do the dice upgrading, which is kind of the whole point of the game, and it definitely works quite well. You know, I could maybe go like, I maybe wish the shade of blue for the Water Tribe dice was a little bit more exactly the color scheme of the Water Tribe symbols and stuff like that, whereas the color in the dice maybe leans a little bit kind of blue going into green rather than blue that the Water Tribe color scheme is. But that's a very minor nitpick. I don't think there's too much of a problem with the color of those dice. Maybe a similar thing could be said for the color of the Earth dice. It's maybe a little bit too kind of pale or light green, whereas the typical green of the Earth Kingdom is a little bit more of, you know, a classic green. But I think it's still really, really functional, and that's just, you know, going to be one of those personal preferences for people. I think people get that these are the right dice for the right colors, and it's mostly very, very functional, of course. The Harmony cards, I think, are overall really good. I like the design on them. I love the shape. It feels cool when you twist them and stuff like that. The only issue, and this is maybe more of a minor nitpick, you might be asking, like, why on earth are you thinking about that? But I just noticed this one time when I was playing, and I haven't been really able to get it out of my mind. It's just effectively the shadowing on these cards I just find to be odd and a bit inconsistent, and a little bit too dark in some spots. And like I said, it's a bit inconsistent across the cards. So what I have here is, this is a silver fire, and then this is a kind of comet red fire card. So they're both fire. But you can see here, the red fire one, you can see basically has sort of a lighting kind of effect to a certain degree in the back overall, and then kind of shadows a little bit as it goes towards the edge. Whereas the standard fire card doesn't really have any lighting or shadowing, and I think this looks quite clean as it is here. And then this just feels a little bit odd that there's the lighting in the middle. And then for the other elements, the issue I have with these is just that basically when you, especially when you look at the card like say that way, it's weird that it's just light up here and then it just shadows as you go down the card this way. So the lightest part of the card is the element symbol in the corner here to mark that it's complete. And the darkest section is basically one of the numbers, which I just find to be a bit of an odd choice, that like when the card is like that, it's complete and you're done with it. But like if it's on the 4, it feels like it's just weird that this is the darkest section of the card, and in certain lighting conditions it feels like it's a little bit odd, tricky to see it just because it's oddly dark. And it is the same on the other ones. There doesn't seem to be an inconsistency between the gold versions of like the other 3 elements, but just the fire is different across the colors. And again, it's similar here, where you note on the water here, it's like dark across here, and then it's just randomly like light in the middle going down to this part. And it's the same with air. So that's just a minor nitpick that I have. That just feels like a slightly odd design decision to have that kind of shadowing effect, but and lighting effect on only specific parts of the card. And I don't feel it's maybe quite needed, because otherwise I think the cards look really nice. I just like, let me see them as clearly as possible is sort of the idea there. Other than that, I'd say my only real feedback with the rest of the stuff really just comes down to these tokens, the kind of challenge markers and the elemental markers, yeah. They're just taller than they need to be. Given that you're moving them around so much, I don't like that there's the sort of knock over and then it's a cylinder and it rolls away kind of effect when you're trying to keep track of the numbers. It feels like if this was like half as tall, it would solve kind of any even potential issues. Not to mention, I think there's just a weird sense of, you know, why is it kind of in a way shaped like this when the boxes are kind of quite like large, but then this is actually like, you could probably fit 2 or 3 of them in each of these boxes. Can we make it just maybe a little bit more like stable or something like that? So, you know, just some slight adjustment to these needed. Obviously, depending on what way you're playing and what way you have things laid out, it should be fine if you have it on like a stable table, but you know, it's just the threat of like it's an easy knock overable kind of type thing. I just wanted to kind of note that. And then I think this is the last thing I want to mention. I think I can tell already that like this is probably the most like placeholder, not really finalized kind of part of the game that I was given. It's just the kind of the token sheet. And the tokens, I'd say mainly just the kind of print quality, and maybe even sort of the kind of cardboard quality to a certain degree doesn't maybe quite feel up to maybe the standard I would maybe expect, especially given that like there's so many of these tokens, they play a big role when you place them down on the on the board. I definitely would want the print quality to be a little bit better, but I think I can tell they're maybe at a bit more of a placeholder point, just because some of the kind of player kind of tokens, especially this one, you can see this is absolutely a placeholder, because like it's a picture of a metal coin printed on cardboard basically. So in the final product here, you know, something like this is actually going to be like an actual like metal coin rather than that. So that's just one of those points. Like they're not like fragile or anything like that, the kind of cardboard pieces or anything like that. They just don't feel like they're quite up to say like the quality of the dice or the board or even like this necessarily. That's just that sense. But I'm assuming that will be a lot better in the finalized version. And then almost forgot this as well. Again, I am assuming that this is not quite the finalized version of this either. This just needs to be a little bit more solid. The wheels are just, to me, a little bit loose, like a little bit kind of wobbly, kind of wiggly. That like if you just like even slightly jostle it, when the numbers are kind of relatively so close together, even a slight adjustment and it goes from like 1 to 2 or backwards from like 1 to 0. And if you're not super paying attention, if you are relying on this to keep track of these numbers, it can be a little bit kind of awkward. And then just from a design perspective, I don't think it looks great that there is just the kind of big the kind of axle, the kind of the plastic black axle going straight through the middle of the symbol of each element. And it, to me, takes up a bit too much of it. Like, say, the water symbol there. I can tell it's the water symbol because I know it's meant to be there, but it does feel like the black plastic piece there obscures, I think, a bit too much of the symbol overall. So in the finalized version of this, my hope would be that maybe you can get a piece that isn't as kind of thick in the part that's kind of displaying, and that it can be a little bit kind of tighter overall, so that it really, when you put it on like one, it stays on one until you purposefully move it. But like I said, it's functional, and I think I can tell from kind of the way it is right now that it is more of a kind of prototype version of that. But the idea of this as like the extra kind of bit to go along with the player board, I think is very cool. These two kind of stacked side by side are really, really nice to kind of get across here. And you can immediately see the idea of this number gets added onto what you're doing here, and that's how the game works. So yeah, just to make it clear as we kind of wrap things up here, overall, I really like the game. And even though it is a kind of prototype, you know, earlier version kind of that I was given, and there's some issues with the rules, it plays like a game that I would be absolutely happy to kind of like buy as an Avatar fan. I think it's interesting and unique compared to some of the games I have played. It certainly stands out compared to other Avatar board games that we have seen before, and I think there is some really nice quality stuff here in terms of like I said at the start, the map is excellent, the dice are excellent, and the harmony cards are excellent as well. There is the you know, the some of the other cards as well, which, you know, you could say maybe make a point about how it is mostly just using either sort of stock imagery that's associated with Avatar that is used on a variety of other products, or it's using screenshots from the show. Of course, I think as Avatar fans, we would always like some new official art to be sort of created for new products. But when you have like that many cards, I do understand how that is more of a sort of maybe slightly challenging thing to do. In the case of this game, maybe if at all possible, you know, the fact that like your trainer cards are effectively what determine like which character you're quote unquote playing as. It would have been nice to see maybe the trainer cards get like their own brand new exclusive piece of art for this game, but I'm not really sure how that necessarily works when it comes to like their licensing stuff, or like how much that would have cost to hire an artist to do that many kind of high quality pieces of art. But it is just something that I think the most hardcore of Avatar fans do notice, is you just get a sense and an eye for, yeah, that's the stock image of Katara that's used on this product and that product, and okay, yeah, they're using it for the Katara card. It makes sense. It is a nice piece of art, but it's been used on a lot of things, even if it is at this point only a handful of years old compared to some of the like much older like 2000s pieces of art. But you know, that's just the way it goes sometimes, and we'll see what they can maybe do, because you know, to a certain degree, that's the benefit of them doing it via crowdfunding, is that they get an opportunity to get feedback from fans along the process, that it's not just sort of a game that's basically completed in a vacuum and then it just comes out and no one ever gets a chance to give feedback on it. That's the whole point of this process. So yeah, the game has impressed me so far, and I'm, in a way, because I have this prototype version, I'm eager to see the progress that some of these kind of components kind of make as it gets to the finalized version of the game, and just to see if the crowdfunding campaign has any fancy stuff going on with it as it progresses. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the game. How do you like the look of it based on how it plays? How do you like this look of specific components? What do you think about some of my feedback on stuff like that? But just overall, let me know your thoughts on Journey of Aang in the comments below. Link in the description to the Gamefound crowdfunding page for this game, which again is going live September 19th, I believe. So yes, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.